They found him in the wreckage 3 days later, alive. The billionaire who destroyed thousands of lives walked away without a scratch. But I was there. I saw what really happened in those final seconds before impact, and I'm the only one who knows the truth he'll never admit. Before I tell you this story, hit that like button, because what you're about to hear will change how you see karma forever. And stick around until the end. Trust me, you won't believe how this ends. My name is Nathan Cross, and for 8 years I was the personal pilot for Vincent Harlow. If you don't recognize the name, you've probably felt his impact anyway. Vincent built his empire in pharmaceutical manufacturing, and on paper he looked like the American dream. Self-made billionaire, philanthropist, the kind of success story that gets featured on magazine covers with headlines like, "The Man Who Saved Medicine." But from where I sat, 35,000 feet in the air, separated by just a thin cockpit door, I saw something very different. Vincent made his fortune buying struggling drug manufacturers and exploiting patent loopholes. He'd acquire a company, take ownership of their formulations, and within months the prices would skyrocket. Insulin that cost families $10 suddenly jumped to $600. Heart medication that kept people alive became so expensive that they had to choose between pills and groceries. I'm talking about a 5,000% increase on drugs people needed to survive. And when journalists or activists confronted him, Vincent had the same line every single time. "It's just business. I'm operating within the law." I want you to understand something about being a private pilot for someone like Vincent. You become invisible. You're part of the furniture, like the leather seats or the crystal decanters in his cabin. He'd take conference calls right in front of me, discuss deals that would bankrupt families, laugh about quarterly profits while people were rationing life-saving medication. I heard everything, and he never once considered that I was listening, that I was human, that maybe I had thoughts about what he was doing. And here's the thing that kept me awake at night. I needed that job. Vincent paid me a six-figure salary. My younger sister had juvenile diabetes, and her treatment was expensive. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was being paid with blood money to afford the very kind of medication Vincent was making unaffordable for everyone else. Every flight, the moral weight got heavier. Every time I fired up those engines, I felt like I was enabling something terrible. But what was I supposed to do? Quit and watch my sister suffer? December 18th started like any other flight. We were scheduled to fly from New York to Vincent's private island in the Caribbean. I'd made this run dozens of times. Routine, easy, usually just Vincent and maybe one assistant. But that morning there was an unexpected addition to the passenger list. A woman named Dr. Helen Moretti was boarding at the last minute. I remember her walking across the tarmac, mid-50s, composed but clearly ill, moving carefully like every step required concentration. She carried an old leather medical bag, the kind doctors used to make house calls with decades ago. What struck me immediately was Vincent's reaction when he saw her. For the first time in 8 years, I saw him nervous. Not angry, not dismissive, actually unsettled. His hand shook slightly when he took his seat, and he kept glancing at Dr. Moretti as she settled in across from him. She requested that specific seat, directly facing him, close enough to have a conversation. The cabin attendant asked if she needed anything, and Dr. Moretti just smiled and said, "Privacy, please. Mr. Harlow and I have important matters to discuss. We reached cruising altitude without any issues. Smooth conditions, clear skies, perfect flying weather." I was running through my standard checks when I noticed the cabin intercom had been left open. It happened sometimes. Passengers would accidentally lean against the panel. I reached to turn it off, but then I heard Dr. Moretti's voice, clear and steady, and something made me stop. "You don't remember me, do you, Vincent?" she said. Her tone wasn't angry. It was almost sad, like she'd expected this. Vincent responded with that practiced charm he used on everyone. "I apologize, I meet so many people. Perhaps you could remind me?" She laughed, but there was no humor in it. 23 years ago, you acquired Moretti Pharmaceuticals. I was the founder. More importantly, I was the lead researcher who developed the insulin formulation you currently sell for $600 a dose. The temperature in the cockpit seemed to drop. I found myself holding my breath, hand frozen over the intercom switch. Vincent's voice came back different now, colder, more careful. Ah, yes. Dr. Moretti, I remember the acquisition. We provided you with a very generous exit package. You signed the papers. I signed because I had no choice, she said. You made sure of that. But I'm not here about money, Vincent. I'm here about my grandson, Daniel. 16 years old, brilliant smile, wanted to be a marine biologist. He died 8 months ago because he couldn't afford his insulin. The same insulin I created. The same insulin you turned into a profit machine. There was a long silence. I could hear my own heartbeat over the engine noise. Then Vincent said something that made my blood run cold. That's unfortunate, but surely you understand. Business decisions can't be made based on individual hardships. It's economics, supply and demand. Supply and demand, Dr. Moretti repeated slowly. My grandson died rationing his medication, and you call it economics. I heard the sound of something unzipping. Her medical bag, I assumed. I'm not here for an apology, Vincent. I'm here for a confession. I've spent the last 8 months documenting everything. Price-fixing schemes, deliberate patent extensions, internal memos where your executives calculated how many deaths were acceptable losses for profit margins. I have recordings, emails, testimonies from whistleblowers. She'd brought a recorder. She was threatening to expose everything. Part of me wanted to cheer, but Vincent just laughed. Actually laughed. And who's going to believe you, Dr. Moretti? A bitter former employee with an axe to grind? My legal team would bury you in litigation before you finished your first interview. That's when her entire demeanor changed. The tension left her shoulders, and when she spoke again, her voice was serene, almost peaceful. I'm already dying, Vincent. Stage 4 pancreatic cancer. 6 weeks, maybe 8 if I'm unlucky. I can't afford treatment, not on what I have left after spending everything trying to save Daniel. So your lawyers don't frighten me. Litigation doesn't frighten me. Nothing you can do frightens me anymore. I heard papers rustling, and Dr. Moretti continued, but I wanted you to see something before I go. There was a pause, and then she said, this is Daniel. 16 years old in this photo. Look at him, Vincent. Really look. Another pause. And these are the others. 47 people who died in the past 3 years because they couldn't afford medication your companies control. I have their names, their stories, their photographs. I wanted you to see their faces. I wanted you to know that karma doesn't forget, even if you do. The warning lights hit my instrument panel like an explosion. Red indicators flashed across every system. Hydraulics failing, navigation crashing, backup systems going offline in sequence. My training kicked in immediately, hands moving through emergency protocols, but nothing responded. The plane shuddered, a deep metallic groan that you feel in your bones. We were losing altitude, and I was losing control. Through the intercom, I heard Vincent screaming, "What did you do? What the hell did you do?" But Dr. Moretti's voice remained calm, almost meditative. Nothing, Vincent. I did nothing. But sometimes the universe has a way of balancing scales. Call it coincidence. Call it fate. Call it whatever helps you sleep at night. I transmitted the Mayday, knowing even as I did that we were 40 minutes from the nearest landing option and the plane was coming apart around us. Hydraulic failure means you lose the ability to control the aircraft's surfaces. Navigation failure means you're flying blind. We had maybe 5 minutes before this became an uncontrolled descent, and there wasn't a landing strip within reach. Standard protocol in a situation like this is clear. Assume crash position, prepare for impact, maximize survival chances through proper procedure. But here's what they don't teach you in flight school. Sometimes you have seconds to make a choice that defies protocol, that goes against every rule, that might make things better or catastrophically worse. I looked at my terrain radar, watching the ground rush up toward us. Thick forest ahead, but I spotted something. A small clearing, maybe 300 yards wide. If I could control the descent angle, just adjust our trajectory by 3 degrees, we might hit the treetops first. The trees would shear off the wings, slow our momentum, and if we were incredibly lucky, the fuselage would tumble into that clearing. It was 1,000-to-1 shot, but it was something. And here's where the story gets dark, where I have to tell you something I've never admitted to anyone. In that moment, with alarms screaming and the ground coming up fast, I thought about Vincent. I thought about every person he'd hurt, every family he'd destroyed. I thought about my sister, surviving only because I was paid with his blood money. I thought about Dr. Moretti, accepting her death with more dignity than Vincent had shown in his entire life. I could have followed standard procedure, straight emergency descent, minimal maneuvering, textbook crash landing. But that was a guaranteed fatal impact. Zero chance of survival for anyone. The statistical certainty of it was almost comforting in its clarity. Or I could attempt something crazy, something dangerous, something that might save lives or might make everything worse. And in that split second, I made my choice. I forced the controls, fighting the failing hydraulics, bleeding altitude in a spiral that would have gotten me failed in any flight test. The plane screamed in protest, metal twisting in ways it was never designed to move. We hit the first line of trees at 180 miles per hour. The impact was like being inside a bomb. The wings sheared off instantly, the fuselage started tumbling, and the world became a nightmare of spinning metal and breaking glass. I remember the sound more than anything else. Metal screaming, trees snapping like gunshots, the high-pitched whine of the engines tearing themselves apart. The cockpit windscreen shattered, and suddenly I was breathing in smoke and pine needles and aviation fuel. The fuselage hit the clearing hard, bounced once, and then everything went sideways and dark. When I woke up, I was staring at hospital ceiling tiles. Everything hurt, and I mean everything. Broken ribs, concussion, second-degree burns on my arms from where fuel had splashed and ignited. A doctor told me I'd been unconscious for 18 hours. The rescue team had found the wreckage 3 days after we went down. 3 days. We'd been lying in that forest for 72 hours before anyone reached us. Then she told me the rest. Dr. Moretti had died on impact. The paramedics said she'd had a peaceful expression on her face, which felt impossible given the violence of the crash, but that's what they reported. The medical examiner confirmed she had late-stage cancer, weeks to live at most. Her death was noted as catastrophic trauma from aviation accident, but everyone agreed she wouldn't have survived much longer anyway. And Vincent Harlow had survived with minor injuries. A fractured arm, some lacerations, bruised ribs. The doctors called it a statistical miracle. His seating position, the way the cabin deformed on impact, the angle of the fuselage when it came to rest. Everything had conspired to create a pocket of safety right where he'd been sitting. He walked out of that hospital 4 days later. The investigation took 6 weeks. NTSB ruled it mechanical failure. No foul play suspected. They found evidence of a catastrophic hydraulic line failure that cascaded through multiple systems. No evidence of tampering, no indication of sabotage, just a tragic malfunction at the worst possible moment. Vincent's official statement was brief and carefully crafted. This was a tragic accident. I'm grateful to be alive and extend my condolences to Dr. Moretti's family. The press ate it up. Billionaire survives miracle crash. Vincent Harlow beats death in Caribbean flight disaster. They called him lucky, blessed, a survivor. Not one article mentioned Dr. Moretti beyond identifying her as a passenger. Not one reporter dug into why she was on that flight or what conversation might have happened before the crash. Her evidence, that recorder, all of it burned in the post-crash fire. The only people who knew about her confrontation were me, Vincent, and Dr. Moretti herself. I never told anyone what I'd overheard. Not the investigators, not the journalists who tried to interview me. Not even my sister when she asked what really happened up there. The official story became the only story, and the truth died in that wreckage along with Dr. Moretti. But something changed in Vincent. I visited him once during his recovery, mostly because the investigation required us to coordinate our statements. He lost weight, looked older somehow, like the crash had aged him years in just weeks. When I walked into his penthouse, he was standing by the window, staring out at the city. He didn't turn around when I came in. She knew, he said quietly. Somehow, Dr. Moretti knew. I didn't respond, didn't ask what he meant. After a long silence, he finally looked at me. His hands were shaking. I keep seeing her face. Everywhere I go, everyone I meet, I see her, and I see that photograph she showed me. That boy, her grandson. 6 months after the crash, Vincent did something no one expected. He announced price rollbacks on 12 major medications, including the insulin formulation that Dr. Moretti had developed. Industry analysts called it financial suicide. His board of directors threatened to revolt. But Vincent pushed it through anyway, and then he went further. He established a foundation in Daniel Moretti's name, dedicated to providing free medication to families who couldn't afford treatment. The press called it a redemption arc, proof that near-death experiences change people. Business journals wrote think pieces about conscious capitalism and the billionaire's moral awakening. But I saw him at the foundation's opening ceremony, and I watched his hands shake when he signed the paperwork. This wasn't philanthropy. This was a man trying to outrun ghosts. Within a year, Vincent sold his entire pharmaceutical division. He gave away 60% of his wealth, actual transfers, not pledges or promises. He became reclusive, stopped doing interviews, disappeared from the social circuit that had once defined his life. The penthouse where we'd had that conversation went on the market. People said he'd moved to Montana, or maybe Vermont, somewhere quiet where he could escape his past. I quit flying after the crash. Couldn't do it anymore. Every time I sat in a cockpit, I'd see those warning lights, hear Dr. Moretti's calm voice accepting her fate, feel that split-second choice hanging over me again. Did I save Vincent so karma could work in a different way? Did Dr. Moretti somehow know this would happen, that survival would be his real punishment? The questions don't have answers, but they've carved themselves into my brain. Last month, I received an envelope in my mailbox. No return address, no note, just a single document inside, a copy of Dr. Moretti's medical records. She'd been diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 11 months before the flight. Stage 4, inoperable, terminal. But here's what made me sit down hard when I read it. She'd stopped treatment 3 months before she boarded that plane. She'd had maybe 6 weeks left, was in constant pain, and had chosen to stop fighting. She'd picked that date, picked that flight, picked the seat across from Vincent. She'd walked onto that plane knowing she was walking toward her death, and she'd orchestrated every moment of it. The confrontation, the evidence, the timing, all of it carefully planned. Dr. Moretti had looked at her remaining time and decided to spend it making sure Vincent Harlow faced the truth of what he'd done. And the mechanical failure? The investigation said it was random, a coincidence. But I keep thinking about the timing, how those systems failed right after she'd shown him those photographs, right after she'd said karma doesn't forget. Was it truly random, or did the universe have a sense of dramatic timing? I'll never know. And maybe that's the point. Vincent Harlow survived that crash. He walked away alive while Dr. Moretti didn't. But I think about him now, living in whatever quiet place he's escaped to, surrounded by luxury he's too haunted to enjoy. I think about Dr. Moretti, resting in a cemetery in Brooklyn next to her grandson, having spent her final moments fighting for something bigger than herself. And I know that sometimes the worst punishment isn't death. Sometimes the worst punishment is surviving. Surviving with the memory of what you've done. Surviving with the faces of the people you've hurt burned into your consciousness. Surviving with the knowledge that you got mercy you never deserved, while someone who spent their life helping others got none. The billionaire's plane crashed, and only one person knew why he survived. It wasn't divine intervention or luck or miracle. He survived because in those final seconds, I made a choice to give everyone a chance, even him. He survived because Dr. Moretti's karma wasn't about revenge. It was about forcing him to live with his conscience. He survived because sometimes the universe doesn't strike you down. Sometimes it makes you keep living until you finally understand. If this story moved you, hit that subscribe button, because karma doesn't always work the way you expect, and I've got more stories that'll make you question everything. Drop a comment telling me, was this justice or something?